All right, how's everyone doing? This is Rudy. It's Sunday afternoon, and I wanted to share with you guys everything I've learned about the Bushmaster BA50 in the time that I've had it, which is what, a month or two? I don't know exactly how long. Had it out to the range maybe 4 times, put anywhere between 50 to 60 rounds through it. I've had quite a bit of experiences. Again, everything that I share is admittedly beginner. So as I talk, if you've got a correction, you feel free to correct me and put your comments and I'll learn from your comments. But I'm learning, and I'm not going to be a beginner for long. I'll move into the intermediate, and I'll say at this point in time, at 100 yards, I can reliably hit a dinner plate. And that's a lot better than when I started. So let me share with you guys my experiences, and if you guys can help me out, let me know. Let me walk out here to the sun. It's really, really, really bright. But you're going to need hearing protection, and that ain't going to cut it. That's just the first level of hearing protection. I recommend some really, really good noise cancelers. You know, you're going to need batteries, and you can turn these on and off, okay? So that's what I recommend for hearing protection. On the gun cleaning, I want to talk about that a little bit. You're going to need a solvent, which I think is this one. And I get the hop solvent. And when you use the solvent, this is called a Viper bore snake, okay? And see, this is specifically made for a 50 cal, and there's wire brush on here. So when I come through the breech and I go through the barrel, this wire brush is the first pass is gonna clean it out. And so I'm told, I put the solvent all over this, like the wire brush and this part of the thing here. So I'll pour the solvent all over that on the first pass. I've already fed it through the barrel, through the breech, and I'll pull it through. I'll demonstrate that here in a little bit. This little piece right here of the Viper bore snake, I don't know if you guys can see that. There you go. Probably can't, but it's stamped with 50 cal. Let's see. Yeah, it says 50. It says 50. I don't know if you guys can see it. So anyway, this is a 50 cal bore snake. I put solvent. I'll put the solvent on this wire brush part. And then what I do is I come back with lubricant, which is this stuff, the Hops lubricant, and I'll just douse all this orange part, and that'll be my second pass. And I'll pull it through just to show you guys. But the solvent goes up here on the wire brush, the lubricant goes back here on the orange part. You do the solvent first and the lubricant second. Okay, and then an old Marine up there at the range said, hey, if you want to buy some cheap targets, just buy some what's called butcher paper. And I got to say, man, I got targets for the rest of my life. What I do is I take this neon center targets right here, and I'll put it on the butcher paper, and I'll take my stapler, you see that stapler right there? And I'll staple it to the board at the end of 100 yards. And that way I got myself a good target, and I'll focus in on these center targets, but I'm using butcher paper for my big target, so I can clearly see where a bullet has gone through it at 100 yards. I don't want to walk every time I shoot. I don't want to walk down there and look at it, right? So I need a spotting scope. Well, this is my best spotting scope right now. That's a pair of binoculars. But I'm told you can get a fairly decent spotting scope for about $50. So I'm still in the market for that. If you guys have recommendations on a good spotting scope, you let me know. And I thought I would show this to you guys. Hopefully you guys see that. It says, ultimately, we will win because we love it more than you hate it. So I don't care how much you hate that thing, which I consider my Southern pride. And you say pride cometh before a fall. Well, I don't put anything above God, but I happen to like that flag, right? That's where I grew up, and ain't nobody gonna shame me. Ain't nobody gonna make me feel bad for flying a flag where I grew up. I'm proud of where I grew up, but I don't put it above God, okay? God comes first always. This is a magazine. I think it holds 10 rounds. There's one that hasn't been spent, and right there, that's one that's been spent. And then right here, you got tannerite. This thing will make a little boom. I'll tell you what though, the 50 cal is so loud when I shoot it that I can't hear the tannerite. And you just kind of have to experience about that. Let me back up. Oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to share. You see that? That's called a sniper rest bag. And at first I thought, that's useless, I won't ever use that. No, no, no. If you want to zero in your scope, you want your 50 cal Bushmaster BA50 to be resting on a rest bag zeroed in on the center target. You don't want to have to be holding it, holding your breath. Just let it rest right on zero target. You can squeeze those bags up and down. I'm going to get some more. I'm going to fill some cloth bags up with rice. and you can get it just perfectly height. And I'm telling you, those things are very, very handy for centering in your scope. But let me get in front of the camera, and I want to finish up some thoughts here. Make sure I got everything. I think that's just about right. I don't know how it's going to look with the shade, the camera in the shade. Okay. Let me share with you guys this Viper bore snake. So like I said, I would put 2 passes. I would put solvent where the wire brush is. I pull it through, and then I would put lubricant all over the orange. I pull it through again. Now you got to feed it through the breech, but I'll just pull it through, and this thing is great. I'm told you can clean in the field. You see how that comes right through? Now I think I had lubricant on it then, so I just lubricated the gun on the barrel. That worked out really good. Oh, feels good to sit down. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, bore sighting. Let me tell you guys my experience with bore sighting. You know that saying, if you want anything done right, you got to do it yourself. I took it up to a place. I paid them $40 to bore sight my gun 2 different times. And let me talk about scopes as well, because bore sighting and scopes go together. The first scope I got was a 20 by 40, I believe. And when you're shooting 100 yards, and keep in mind the range, the only range I got available to me close to my house is 100 yards. So I tried a 20 by 40 scope, and if I just breathed hard, the target would go out of focus. I mean, it's really, really difficult, at least it was for me as a beginner, to hold the target with a 20 by 42 scope. So I traded it in. I said, hey, this 20 by 42 for what I need right now is way too powerful. I would prefer to have a 10 by 42, and you want to be able to see through the scope while holding your eye, your eye at least 6 inches back, maybe further. There's a chin rest on this thing that you can adjust. This thing's got an adjustable chin rest. So when you put your head here, you rest your chin on this thing, you look through the scope, and you don't want your eyeball right on the scope because this thing's going to come back pretty hard. You don't want a black eye, right? You know what I mean? You don't want your 50 cal to put your eyeball out. So you keep your eye fair enough distance beyond your scope, and you can center it in on the target and pull the trigger. Okay, but the point I'm going to go back to having somebody bore sight your scope. Don't do it. When I had these guys, supposedly professionals, bore sight my scope, this is an SWFA, I think it's a Midlothian, Texas company. They're fairly reasonable on price. This scope was less than $300. But the problem is, when he gave me the scope back after he bore sighted it, he didn't tighten up any of the Allen wrench screws. And so I was out there playing in the field shooting ammo, and my scope was not adjusting at all. This called MOA, minute of angle, and every click, whether you're going right or left, or whether you're going up or down, is like a half an inch or an inch at 100 yards. Now you have to figure that out, and it's dependent on what type of scope you have. But like for instance, if you want to go over, let's just say for example that your particular scope, every single click, and you're doing the right and left click, if every click is half an inch at 100 yards, and you want to move over 3 inches to the right, well then you'd move 4 times 3, you'd move 12 clicks. You see what I mean? And so you got to know your minute of angle of the scope that you got, and you got to know the right and left and the up and down. And the point I'm making is, when he gave me my scope back, the caps just fell off because he didn't tighten up the Allen wrenches. It goes back to that saying, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Well, he gave it back to me so bad after I paid him to bore sight it. And not only that, but it's like there was only one guy in the whole shop that even did bore sighting, and he wasn't coming back to the shop for another 7 days. Well, I ain't going to wait 7 days on this joker to come back. I was very disappointed in this particular shop. So I took it up to the range, and I put a target out 30 yards. And I would center in on the center target, and I would see which direction the bullets would go. And then I would start adjusting the scope. Well, I had to tighten up all the Allen wrenches first because they gave it back to me and it wasn't tightened up. So the bottom line is, I centered it in at 30 yards manually. I moved it out to 70 yards. I centered it in again, and then I moved it out to 100 yards. And I finally got to the point where I can hit a small dinner plate pretty regular. And so I feel pretty good about that. Hitting a small dinner plate for a beginner at 100 yards, well, you sharpshooters, you may laugh at that. But for a beginner like me, I feel pretty good. I wasn't even hitting the paper when I first started because my scope was so far off. So I talked about bore sighting, how to manually bore sight your scope. I wouldn't pay somebody jack squat because, they're going to mess it up. They're going to give your scope back all messed up. Take care of your gun yourself. Learn how to do it yourself, and you'll have a lot more control over what happens. Make sure you have Allen wrenches that fit your scope. Make sure you have Allen wrenches that tighten not only the scope caps that adjust your right and left, your elevation, but also have make sure your parallax is set right, your focus for your particular eye. Everybody's eyes are different. So not only your right adjustment, your elevation adjustment, but you want to adjust your parallax for your particular eyes. And then you want to tighten your rail scopes. You don't want your scope to be coming loose every time this thing fires off. So that's important. Make sure you got your chin lift adjusted. You want your chin to be resting on this chin lift. Get yourself a good spotting scope. If you're shooting 100 yards, which my range only has a 100-yard range, you don't want to walk down there every time you shoot to find out where you hit, right? You want a good spotting scope to find out where your bullets are hitting the target. And eventually, I'm told they're going to be building a 600-yard range. Now, I'm going to need a really good spotting scope at that point because I don't want to walk 600 yards every time I fire the gun off, you know what I mean? Ammo. I want to talk about 50 cal ammo. If I get reloads on the internet, I can go down as low as $2 a bullet. If I get Federal from a place called LuckyGunners.com, if I buy in bulk, I can get it at $3 a bullet. So reloads around $2, Federal at Lucky Gunners. If I buy bulk, it's a little over $3 a bullet. So every time you pull the trigger, if you're not using reload, it's over $3. There was one time, out of all the times I've shot the gun, probably 50, 60 times total, there was one time the firing pin struck the bullet and it didn't fire. Now, some people tell me just throw the bullet away. Some people tell me, well, go ahead and fire it again. So just something to consider. I'm not an expert, you guys tell me. But I'll tell you what, another thing you need to be aware of, if you buy a 50 cal Bushmaster, when you go out to the range, everybody's going to want to pay attention to what you're doing. Because, you know, everybody wants to fire this thing. And so you ought to be prepared to be generous. Let everybody take a round. It's going to cost you $3 a pop. But you make a lot of good friends. It's an opportunity to pass out Schaeffer Cox business cards. And so, you know, I see it as an opportunity to help spread the word for Schaeffer Cox. Last time I was out at the range, there were two press reporters from Daily Mail. And they were trying to find out where Xavier Johnson trained. And I told them to check into the Black Hebrew Israelite, and I handed them a Schaeffer Cox business card. I said, if you want a real story, you should check out Schaeffer Cox. I already told you about butcher paper, and you can buy center targets for a lot cheaper than buying a whole target. Make sure you got a staple gun, so you can put your butcher paper on the board down there at 100 yards. You know, the range may have their own stuff, but get your own stuff in case the range, somebody else is using it. You don't want it to be dependent upon other people. You want to be self-sufficient, right? So make sure you get some sniper sandbag rest for zeroing in your scope. In a case of duress, where you're firing in I would say a combat situation, not that I've ever done that, but I would imagine you ain't going to have time for sniper sandbag rest. You know what I mean? But if you got time to set up, you want to get some sniper sandbag rest. So anyway, that's what I've learned in the time that I've had the gun. I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm learning. You know, my dad said, it ain't no hill for a stepper, and us Texas boys, we don't claim to be experts. We don't claim to be the smartest tool in the shed, but we apply ourselves and we work hard, and we don't give up, and we know evil when we see it, and when it comes time to get ready, we get ready. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, if you know what I mean.